Hi, welcome to Integrated. This is the podcast where we bridge the gap between the intellect and the will with the goal of coming more into our nature so that we can grow as disciples of Christ. My name is Angela Erickson, and this is another really good episode. I interviewed this week Carrie Gress, and it was just incredible because we've had this book for, I don't know, over a month, but maybe about over a month now. And I just didn't even take into account that Roe versus Wade was probably going to be overturned. And it just turned out that she was scheduled to come on to talk about her book, The Anti-Mary Exposed, Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity. And we covered so much ground in this interview. It's a little bit maybe all over the map, but that's just because it was, she just had so much to say about, where feminism kind of originated from to how she wrote this book. And then we sort of ended talking about the nature of woman. And I think this is going to be a great interview, regardless of if you're a guy or a girl. Like this just gives so much insight onto like feminism as a movement and its impact on our culture today. So please give it a listen. I am really excited for you to hear about her and her amazing work. And even we talk about how she got canceled back in 2020 after the inauguration of Joe Biden. So definitely tune in. And if you have been liking Integrated, please subscribe. I'm now on YouTube. So if you haven't, please go over to my YouTube channel and hit subscribe. It just makes my podcast pop up more for people who are looking up this type of content. So the more of you that can help me out on there and subscribing on your favorite podcasting platform, the better. So make sure you do that. Like, subscribe, share, do all of the things that you're able to do. And if you have been enjoying listening to Integrated, please consider becoming a patron. I would really appreciate that. The costs, they don't get smaller. I wish they did, but I would really appreciate any help just offsetting the basic costs of like running a website, replacing equipment or social media links and all that stuff. I mean, the blog, graphics, graphic design. There are a lot of things that you wouldn't think about that go into the back end of making sure I can get content published for you guys, including the recording platform that I'm using to record this episode. So thank you so much. I'm so grateful for those of you who are my patrons, and I hope that you enjoy this interview with Carrie Gress on the Anti-Mary Exposed. Hi, Carrie Gress. Thank you so much for coming on to Integrated. I just am thrilled to have you on. I've been since I knew I was starting this podcast, I knew I was going to have you on at some point because the whole theme of my podcast is really integrating the intellect and the will and bridging that gap so that our souls are integrated with our bodies, right? Because our bodies reveal our inner dispositions and vice versa. So would you mind telling maybe those who are listening that aren't familiar with all of your work, please share with them some of the great stuff that you've been doing over the last several years?
Oh, sure. I'd be happy to. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm Carrie. I have 5 kids. I homeschool a few of them now. I've been doing that for about 7 years in various stages. And I finished a PhD in philosophy, I guess shortly after my 3rd child was born. And since then, I've been publishing books. I'm working on my 10th book right now, and the 9th one, Theology of Home 3, should be out any minute. We've had all these issues with the publisher, but we. In the midst of all of that, I have started a website and a blog called Theology of Home, kind of a spin-off of the books that I have written with Noelle Mehring. And it's a blog, it's a home goods shop, it's all kinds of things, because I just saw these huge gaps in how we were serving women in the Catholic Church and how we weren't serving women in the church, and just really a limited scope in terms of thinking about evangelization. I think as Catholics, we think of evangelization as apologetics, and I think it's just so much bigger and broader than that. And women do a lot of it very non-verbally, even with just gift giving. And so there's all kinds of reasons that we're doing all these things at Theology of Home, but one of the bigger ones is that it's also just really fun. Like in fact, I was telling someone recently that if I had realized how much fun it was to shop for my store before I finished my doctorate, I probably would never have finished the doctorate. It was just so much more interesting. Um, and I've also written some more serious books. The Anti-Marriage Exposed it came out about 4 years ago. It got canceled 2 years ago, which gave it
Yes.
some real life. And I'm currently working on a follow-up to the Anti-Marriage Exposed, which is actually more, it's similar, but it's for a secular audience, to really start seeing the ways in which women have been manipulated by the culture and elite men and women for really the last 50 years, into really seeing a deformed version of femininity and of womanhood, which is also why no one can define womanhood anymore because
Exactly. What is a woman?
um, exactly, we've shoehorned it into something that it's not. So anyway, that's kind of a nutshell version of what it is that I've been doing and I'm up to.
Well, I have been a big fan of your work for years. I'm still hanging in there. I know there's an apron I want to get out of your shop too. I've been eyeing up the aprons because I just love that women are embracing that stuff again too in the kitchen and all that. But the reason I'm having you on today is to talk about the Anti-Marriage Exposed, and what better timing than with the falling of Roe versus Wade. I just can't believe like God totally plan this out. I couldn't have planned it better myself. So
Yeah,
with the Anti-Marriage
great.
Exposed, let's talk about, first of all, let's maybe start with the beginning of the feminist movement, because you do touch on the demonic components of that. And I love that you highlighted that, because I think that often gets overlooked within scripture and within the tradition of the church, understanding why some of these vices that women have more of a propensity for are really embodied in these different demonic spirits. And those spirits really bring life to the feminist movement. So would you mind explaining to or speaking to that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's so many different directions I could go
I know.
within that scope. But I think, speaking of virtues and vices, one of the vices that women have a deep propensity towards is envy, and this sort of feeling like we're missing out, or we're not being chosen, or whatnot. And you can even see that goes back to Eve. I mean, this is the question of, like, what the way that the serpent tempts her and whatnot. So this is, and it's also, we're also very prone to fashions. I think this is something that we miss a lot, that we think, we're independent thinkers and all of that. And then when you start really looking at the trends of the last 50 years, you realize, it's very hard to be out of lockstep with the movement if you're in any way secular, or staying in time with the movement, because it's just really shaped us mentally in ways that I think we have no idea.
Yeah.
So yeah, what's basically happened is that it's this combination of Marxism and paganism that have really animated the feminist movement since the late 1960s and 70s. And I go into these different kinds of spirits. Lilith, it was a demonic element that came up really early in my research. Also the Jezebel spirit and those kinds of things, which the Lilith one, apparently, I talked to exorcists and, all kinds of people that have spent a lot more time looking at this than I ever will. But, they talked about this Lilith spirit being something that animates homosexuality, which, of course, was one of the main elements of radical feminism from the beginning, was this idea and this desire to get rid of gender completely, to just wash it out. And Gloria Steinem, even just a few years ago, she wrote a book when she turned 80. And she talked about how proud she was that she finally got to this point where she didn't consider herself a woman or man, and she wasn't, she was just sort of pansexual, like just open to whatever. And anyway, that was really the goal from the beginning, was to just erase all of this. And of course, we're seeing this now lived out very concretely with LGTB movement, the trans movement, and all of those things happening. So those things didn't come out of nowhere, but we're really seated in all of this. But yeah, I think that there's definitely these elements of the demonic that have played a role in it. You can see it certainly in the halftime. Go watch almost any halftime
Yeah.
show from the Super Bowl, specifically Madonna's, or
Or
any of them.
Beyonce. Yeah.
But there's yeah, all of that really speaks to kind of this movement that they've been working in, where the woman is really overly sexualized. The maternal elements are really downplayed, and you also see it even in just the discussion of empowerment in the culture. You can't go to even a bookstore for teenagers and look at books and see everything is all about empowerment, and that kind of language is always used.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm all for creating opportunities for women. That's not the point. But when it's really garbled in such a way that what's really being upheld is that women become like men, and that's why we can't define what a woman is, because we've spent 50 years really holding up on a pedestal the life that men had, and women were told that that's what they needed to emulate in order to be happy. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
feeling that even as a first or second grader,
Yeah,
kind of
I've
being
had the
in competition
similar.
with men.
Yeah, isn't that
Yeah.
so weird? And
Um,
it's not healthy. It's
yeah.
not normal to feel that way as
No,
a
it's not.
child. I was
Mm-mm.
such a tomboy, and that was a
Mm-hmm.
big reason. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, part of it, and two, like, I know you talk about this as well, but with the breakdown of the family, I think a lot of young girls, they're missing their dads and they're looking for affirmation from
Mm-hmm.
other men in their lives. And so they spend a lot of their time
Yep.
as children trying to get praise. And as they get older, it changes the type of behavior because it becomes more sexualized in order
Mm-hmm.
to get that type of attention, somebody to tell them that they love them. But as a younger
Mm-hmm.
child, I felt like I was a big tomboy because I loved being affirmed from other boys, and not in a like I wanted sort of like the crush type attention, but just affirmation that I was good and that I was excelling in some area or whatever. Just have that
Mm-hmm.
acknowledgement, and it bled into other things. Like I wanted to be an altar server and things like that. Like because
Mm-hmm.
there to me there wasn't a distinction. I remember as a child thinking, "Oh, I can do anything a boy can do. That's
Yeah.
silly. Why can't I go
Yeah.
do that?" And
Right.
as an adult and
Yeah.
you grow and mature physically, you become a mother, you're like, actually, there are a lot of differences, and they're not bad differences, they're good
Mm-hmm.
differences. So, how did
Yeah.
we come to a
Yeah.
place with these women? Because, before they started fighting, this whole, the first wave feminism, what was the genesis of that? Like, even before that, right? It takes a while for something to take root. And so, how did we see so many women who were discontented with being mothers? I mean, was it after World War II, so many of them were working, or what was it exactly that really drove women into the workforce?
It's super interesting to me to look at this question because I've lived it both in Europe and in the United States, and just even seeing, I think that the ramifications of the war were so huge. I mean, you had women who obviously had jobs, but you also had women, especially in Europe, who just there was an entire population of men who were gone or wounded, and so that's going to play itself out dramatically. You also have this tremendous amount of psychological damage, that was done to people that were in those wars as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I think all of those things sort of fed into it. And I think there's also an element of Protestantism, even going back further, is another part of it, because they, thrown out where certainly Our Lady is a model, but also all the female saints are no longer at play within a discussion of what holiness looks like. Um, so yeah, I think it's just a real disruption of the family and of how an ordered family operates.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and then also just a real shaking of the faith. A lot of people say, oh, you just want to go back to the 1950s, and of course my answer is always like, no, I never want to go back to the 1950s, because
Mm-hmm.
if the 1950s really had a deep faith, an abiding and alive faith, the way that people think it did, the 60s never could have happened the way that they
Right.
did. It just was this internal crumbling. So yeah, I think this is something where we have to move forward within what we've got, and not long for something that was probably not as perfect as we'd like to imagine it was.
Mm-hmm.
um, but there was, yeah, some real internal issues and shaking going on. And it's even interesting to look at kind of the baby boomer culture where this all started, because of course there were a lot of them. There were also their parents that didn't want them to suffer. They didn't want them
Yeah.
to really live through what they had lived through. And so you can kind of see just this beginning. And also I think that a huge issue It's just the amount of wealth that we have in the West. Because it's fascinating to see, what happens in the United States when there are natural disasters and things like that. Automatically people sort of revert back to these very traditional roles.
Yes.
But it's easy to not notice that or sense that or even live that in any real way. When all of us are overfed and have plenty of wealth, comparatively compared to the rest of almost all of human history. And we're not threatened by something. We don't have any immediate threats to us either in terms of war or wild animals, all these things that most people have dealt with, we haven't really had to deal with. And so in light of that, it's just easy to sort of skate and think that we can kind of create these new realities and thwart human nature, recreate human nature in any way that we want. So those are all certainly pieces of it. But then you sort of inject this Marxism to it. And the Marxism really was this effort to erase gender as well. We certainly saw that in Soviet Russia. So yeah, that you just have all these kind of forces coming together. And we were really sold this in a way that was compelling and attractive versus the Soviets, which, they faced an actual revolution and something that was very bloody and ugly. So in the United States, we sort of just took it on because it was stylish and it was, they used the media and TV to really present it as something good and savvy. And this is what the smart women are doing. So anyway, there were things that were missing, and then there were things that were, manipulating us simultaneously. So I think it's a really complex question, but certainly really interesting to start seeing these tentacles and how they've affected all of us.
Right. And I think it is really interesting to note that so many of these female pioneers of the women's movement in the 60s and so on, often they had really difficult relationships with their biological mothers, for one, and they often were lesbians or seeking, and I think it was your book, if I'm not mistaken, that kind of highlights some of these experiences that people who were within the movement kind of escaped, things that they witnessed, whether it was satanic rituals and things like that, really early on. I'm pretty sure that was your book. And
that was definitely in there. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I think it's really fascinating because we see even now sort of this continual resurgence of this new age sort of goddess worship, and really elevating women and her fertility as something good because it is good, but they've perverted it as the devil always does, and at the same time they reject it, right? Like women's power they recognize as in bringing life into the world and creating life, having life growing within her, but then to make it more powerful, to be able to have the capacity to also end that life, being God. And with that, I think too, a lot of people don't see the connection often, even within the pro-life movement, this connection between being pro-life and opposed to homosexuality and all these other things. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I used to call myself a pro-life feminist when I was in my early 20s and I started working on a national level for the pro-life movement. And it was really in vogue, you could say, to call yourself a pro-life feminist. It was your way of relating to all these other groups of pro-lifers that maybe felt that they were more on the sidelines. And as I've gotten older, I really reject the notion that you can baptize the word feminism. I don't even think that the first wave feminists I'm sure some of them were pro-life, but they didn't understand the dissonance, because you wouldn't have feminism at all, or at least it wouldn't have made any progress without contraception and abortion. Those are the legs that it stands on, and whatever type of feminism you have. Would you say that I'm missing the mark, or there's something I'm overlooking and feeling that way, or what are your views with that?
Yeah, no, I am entirely sympathetic to it, because I think the second wave is really where you're absolutely right. It was really motivated, and like the engine of it was contraception. Because that suddenly allows women to sort of not be women, where you're controlling your own fertility, and then abortion was the real piece that glued all of these feminists of different stripes together. So I think that's the case, but it is interesting because I think the biggest problem is just feminism means so many different things now. So it doesn't really it's been stripped of all of its meaning. It means whatever people really want it to mean. Most of the time, it has a kind of a hidden ideology. embedded within it. And it's incredibly hard to parse those things out. And most people don't have the philosophical training to see, like, oh, wow, I'm embracing Marxism.
Right.
It's also really a challenge, especially for Catholics, because of the fact that, you're the main tenet of radical feminism is the rejection of patriarchy. Well, what is the church? It's a
It's a,
patriarchy. So
yes.
yeah, so I think that's a hard piece. I think the other piece that's developed that's super interesting is the identity politics piece, where a woman is a victim solely because she's a woman, and a man is an oppressor solely because he's a man. That doesn't play itself out in any way, in a coherent way, in terms of the anthropology of the church, and our understanding of culpability and whatnot. So those are some serious issues that I think everyone that calls themselves a feminist has to grapple with, and maybe there are ways around them to define them, but if you do that, then you have this whole host of like clauses or descriptions or
Right.
definitions. Like, if you're going
Different.
to use the term, be
Yeah.
careful how you're using it and use it clearly and precisely. So there are people that do that, and I respect them deeply, and I understand what's motivating it. But I also think that there's a lot out there that's just really sloppy, misunderstood, or is just further confusing women, especially women of goodwill, who are really just seeking out the truth and want to just live their life and do the best they can for themselves and their daughters and their friends and family. So yeah, it's a really hard piece right now.
So, what has been some of the most interesting aspects of the reactions that you've seen with the Fallover versus Wade? I would love to hear your take on some of that, because I've seen some of the most. Well, first of all, I spoke at a rally last Friday, the day that it fell, and you could actually see like the demonic manifestation coming from certain people who are counter protesting and things like that. It was very alive and well. And like, I just feel as if a lot of these women, you're right, there's this confusion about their nature. They reject it. But it's like, how do you tell these women that this is what you were made for? And it's a beautiful thing. Part of the reason you're so angry is because you're rejecting. Like, I find even in motherhood, my worst days are when things are not going my way, because I'm not like leaning into motherhood. I'm trying to get things done the way that I want them to, which just doesn't happen when you have 5 small children, right? And so those days are always the hardest, because I'm not just being humble and saying, you know what? This isn't going to be a priority today. It just can't be. Obviously, my kids need more from me. And I feel like we as women have been taught we're not meeting our potential if we're not doing X, Y, and Z. But like, motherhood takes a back seat, and you see it with these women screaming about how they won't have abortion anymore. They're really angry about it, even if they are already mothers, which I just find really fascinating, because they personally chose to have their children, and they don't want other women to be forced into having their children. Like, what are some of the things that you've seen, and how would you talk to those women who really are experiencing that dissonance, and maybe don't know how to emulate Our Lady, even within the church?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great question. It's just incredible, not remotely surprising to see the reactions that we've seen. I think the image that stuck with me the most out of all of this is the woman who brought her 3 children to some protest and had the sign, I'm sure you've seen it, that said something
Yeah.
like, "Don't force this on anyone." It's just horrifying reality. But I think, that's the advantage of being able to write a book, is you can say a lot more in a book than you have in a soundbite. And I think this is one of the really big struggles that we have as a culture, is that everything is really soundbitey, and
Yeah.
I'm loving the fact that we can ask the question, what is a woman? It's a great soundbite. It conveys so much.
Yes.
It's just out there. But it's really hard to do that and go back and explain, all of these deep concepts, that this whole narrative that's been foisted upon us in a very short, pithy way.
Right.
So I think that's the beauty of the fact that, so many of us, this is an issue that I see women being able to bring to other women, where it's a dialogue and it's a conversation, and it goes on for a long time. If I do have people reading the book, I know that there have been some pretty remarkable changes in women's lives. I know a woman who left the lesbian lifestyle because she just realized how much she had been brainwashed into the whole movement. Another woman had been working at Planned Parenthood, and she read the book and she just was like, wow, now I understand all this disfigurement and or all this destruction and disorder in my workplace. And so she's left there, and now she's doing a master's degree at Steubenville. So, I think there have been some amazing stories, but the big key piece is really to say, look, we're living the ultimate misogyny. We can't even tell you what a woman is, because we have made men and maleness an idol. And now it's really coming back to haunt us, because this is what, men are like, okay, this is what you want. You don't want any gender. Well, we're going to come back and play in your sports and take your scholarships and win your awards and, all of that. So it's very cyclical to see that this is really what was at the heart of it. There was this desire to get rid of gender. And now, nobody really realized that men would actually like call the bluff and move in that direction. So, I think it's just a hard thing to really put into sound bites, but it comes back to this idolizing of something that we're not meant to idolize.
Yeah. And if you saw my mom, she's helping me watch the kids today. She brought my daughter, Veronica. She's like 3 months old. So if you saw that little commotion, that's what it was. Veronica's now nursing. But one thing that I was thinking while you were talking is that, feminism really was to dismantle the patriarchy. And I always have found it so ironic that everything that they've done to dismantle the patriarchy, so to speak, has really harmed women and made men and their desires less able to be controlled, right? Like men are allowed to do whatever they want, live. There are no repercussions for their behavior now because they're not, there's nothing that we're doing to encourage them to live virtuous lives. They get to be very hedonistic without consequence. And as a result, women are the ones who suffer. They're the ones that are seeking abortions because there's a man who, wanted to pretend to be married for a night, and then she's the one left grappling with a new life often. And I always find that really interesting. And then you move into the transgenderism realm of things, and again, it seems like men are better at being women than women are these days, right? Like they're on the front page of CoverGirl modeling their makeup and doing all this stuff, and women once again are left in the dust as if they don't matter. I mean, it seems to me that it's had the exact opposite effect than what women were hoping for, because now men get off totally scot-free, and women think it's better because they, for some reason, can also have sex in their mind without consequence. But as you and I both know, there's always consequence to being intimate with somebody, especially outside of marriage. So would you mind maybe drawing out the relationship between feminism and homosexuality and things like that? Because sometimes I don't think people see the connection, especially pro-life people. They think the two are separate issues, and they actually are very much intertwined.
No, they're very much intertwined. And it goes back again to contraception entirely, because with contraception, what you're doing is you're making it that you're cutting away fertility entirely. So it really becomes just about pleasure and bonding for the most part. And that's again where the bonding is the piece that is also what's so painful for women, which most of us don't know. And I think, just as an aside, I think it's also important to point out just how unhappy women are. It would be different to look at these situations and say, oh, well, women are flourishing and they're doing well. Well, no, they're not. I mean, all of the reality is that, depression's on the rise, STDs, suicide, divorce, all of these pieces that are really markers of women's happiness are showing that women are not happier from this. So, and that's kind of the big part of the big lie. I mean, there's so many big lies. The first one is, of course, that we don't need men. The second one is that our children are an obstacle. And then the third one is that this is going to make you happy. And I can tell you, I speak to women all the time who are like, I did everything they told me to do, and I'm miserable. My parents have died. I never got married. I didn't have children. Who am I? Like, there's no context for their life anymore. And they're trying to rebuild, as a 50, 60, 70-year-old woman. So I think, but it does come back to certainly to contraception, and that's really the start of it. So if you have people that are then having sex for their own reasons, then it sort of becomes, and it's not about having children, then it becomes a very natural extension to think about homosexuality as something like, we're just doing what they're doing. They're sterile. We're sterile. What's the difference? And that's, the irony is just that there are people that predicted this. I know Charlie Rice at the University of Notre Dame, the law school there, he would talk about this in his classes. And of course, the students just thought it was ridiculous. Like, are you kidding me? Gay marriage will never come about. And he's like, nope, it's coming. And sure enough, we have it.
It was fast. It came quickly.
And it's really very quickly. Yeah. And that's the power of the media. I mean, this is one of the things that what motivates me to do a lot of the things that we're doing is I saw researching this book, just how much we have given over to this whole elite movement. We don't, we just have, it's politics, Hollywood, fashion, magazines, publishing, you name it. They really control all of this. And if there are those of us that speak out against it, they have ways of ignoring us, silencing us, canceling us, calling us problematic, whatever. So it's pretty remarkable to see just how much they control that. And I think that's one of the reasons why we even got into writing Theology of Home, because I thought, if they're going to create these gorgeous magazines that are just fused with their message, why are we not creating something just as beautiful with our message? And that's really where that's come from, because that's how women absorb content. We love magazines. We love flipping through them. There's something very at home about that experience of flipping from topic to topic and looking at beautiful images and getting inspired by things. And so anyway, all of that is why they've been so successful, because it was really built on this lie of sex can be separated from fertility. And from there, of course, homosexuality is going to just spring from that.
Right. So talk a little bit about you being canceled. I want to hear about that. Like, how did you first learn that you were canceled? And like, what was the core of people's criticism against you and your book, The Anti-Mary Exposed? I want to hear more about that, because I know I heard you go on a few interviews at the time, but it was a while ago. So I'd like a refresher.
Yeah, no, it was a couple of years. No, I mean, it was really weird, because it was Sunday morning and I just got this message from a bookstore that was trying to sell Anti-Mary Exposed on their platforms on Facebook, and first on Facebook. And they said, Facebook isn't letting us put this there. We can't sell it there anymore. And I thought, okay, well, maybe it's just a glitch, but that's interesting. It's 4 days after Biden's inauguration. The timing is probably not that right. It's a 2-year-old book.
Right.
It was just, all of it was really interesting. So then later in the day, when they said they couldn't also post it on Instagram, it was like, okay, this is not just a glitch. There's something very targeted happening here. So that was really interesting. And the big thing really, they just said it went against their community standards. And of course, the subtitle of the book has the words toxic femininity in it. So I think that that's probably what drove it more than anything, was the fact that, women are not ever supposed to be criticized or looked at critically, or, nothing. We can't do anything about women doing anything wrong, which is actually why the Amber Heard situation is so interesting to me, because, finally a woman got caught and called out on it. But I think, so that was the first layer of it. And then the book just was selling like crazy, because of course we put it out on our social media and people were just mad and were buying it. So it was up to 200 on Amazon, and Amazon just stopped selling it. You could buy like a secondhand copy or two. They sold through those. But you know how when you buy something on Amazon, it will say you purchase it, it'll be delivered when we get it back in stock. And we knew from the publisher's side that they had already ordered more. But for like a week, you couldn't actually order it. There was no buy this book button on Amazon. So I think that they were trying to prevent it from getting into the top 100 or to doing well through that. I mean, it would go up for like 2 hours, and our publisher would call and it would go up, and then it would be taken down. And anyway, there was just a lot. It was just, again, more than just a glitch. There were too many. It's one thing when it happens once and it goes back up and it's up for the duration. But when it's happening like this over and over again for well over a week, something is being orchestrated. So, so that was really interesting. But it was just, it was great for the book.
It always is. Getting canceled is good for business. Yeah.
Yeah. No. It was, It's really, really wonderful for it just to give it kind of a second life. But yeah, so it was amazing too, sort of who reached out to me. It was a lot. I did a lot of media for Eastern European countries who had been under
Oh,
the Soviets. I did Russia
interesting.
Times. I did, like everybody was sort of like, how is this happening in America? And anyway, but yeah, it was clearly
That's
happening. So
awesome. That's really interesting. And I love, and I actually wrote this on my notes. I'm looking at it now. I want to talk about women and accountability because you're right. We have seen, you even see it. This is something I was talking with Melody Lyons about quite a bit, but
yeah.
we were discussing this somewhat privately, but even with the whole breast, the formula shortage, and then you start asking questions about like why so many women struggle to breastfeed. And then anytime you mention it, and I'm somebody who has struggled to nurse all of my kids. All of my kids have oral ties. I think I've been chronically undernourished like my entire life. And I'm just starting to realize it now that I'm almost 30 because this has been such a long issue and I'm otherwise quite healthy. So,
Right.
why is it that women get so upset and on guard anytime you say, take this breastfeeding thing, for example, like, what if maybe there's more you could do? Or maybe the medical
Right.
establishment has been helping you as much to embody femininity, because this is an area I would say, too, that Western medicine has really failed women in so many ways. You talk about obstetrics, all of these things. Women don't know how their bodies physiologically give birth. They haven't seen it before, even until the first time they go into labor. And they always depict it as being this horrifying experience. Anytime you see a movie or anytime you tell someone you're
Hmm.
pregnant, you have to hear everybody's horror story. And
Right.
often
Right.
those horror stories are because there was a cascade of interventions that maybe they didn't even need to begin with. But nobody's telling women that. And so, how is it
Hmm.
that like I'd love to hear you talk more about women and accountability and some of the areas that I think, or maybe that you think women lack all accountability in because of feminism. Because you're right, it's just there's just this constant duplicity, and there's no
Right.
they want everything but no accountability. They're
Hmm.
always a victim. Why do women take on this victimhood mentality?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's a great question, and one I'm really digging into in the next book, just because I think it's fascinating. It's part of it is because it's really effective. I mean, the feminism has been so effective because of the fact that it took men out at the knees, really, with this. Everything's the patriarchy's fault, and even with this book, I had women, say to me, some women who read it say, "Well, you didn't blame men at all for it," and I was like, "Well." They've been blamed for 50 years for everything. I think there can be one book where we don't make it about them, where we don't have to dig into that. But I think that that's been so highly effective. And so men are afraid to say anything. It
Mm-hmm.
just isn't ever going to go well. And they just don't. So that's one thing. And then other women are afraid to speak out about it. But you can see how that, and it's endemic in the whole culture. But it's really started with women, that if you are a victim, then no one's going to criticize you in any way. So if you watch something like The View, it's fascinating to watch because they go back and forth between these different positions. They're either a victim or they're a bully. It's one or the other, and sometimes at the same time. But
Mm-hmm.
those are really the ways that it has become incredibly, it's been very effective. And you can also see it among men in elite media and celebrities and whatnot, that they will do the exact same thing again, because I think it's so effective that they play that victim card, and then they don't have to really be responsible for anything they do. In fact, I was
Mm-hmm.
talking with a man a few weeks ago, and he was saying, "Oh, there must be a lot of um, women running, Kamala Harris's office." And I said, "Well, I don't know that that's necessarily the case. I think it's men who have usurped this kind of bullying, victimhood balance." So, yeah, I think that is another one of those areas that has just kind of seeped down into the larger culture because it's so effective. So it's interesting to even just think about how it is that we absorb that in our own lives, and even being accountable ourselves. Like, okay, am I, if I'm, I remember being a teenager and thinking if I get pulled over, I'll just start, for speeding, I'll just start crying, and because it works, it's highly
That's so
effective, and it's just
funny.
those. No, this was before my conversion, but yeah, I was like, this is going to work for me. So, we know that these things work, and there's a certain amount of sympathy and all of that. But I think as women, we need to start holding ourselves accountable for things that we are doing wrong, as well as our children, and really being Now it's hard because you don't want to also judge. I mean, it's just that's a whole other
Right.
piece, is kind of balancing that out. But yeah, I think being aware of these different tactics and how we're either using them in our lives or how other people are using them, especially to manipulate our own thoughts on a situation.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what the problem, also the problem with a place like The View, where they've got, the clap signs and things like that, where they get the audience to agree with them on certain things
Mm-hmm.
that they should never be agreeing with. All those talk shows did that, and that's another way in which they really influence our ideas by um, prompting an audience to look favorably about these awful things.
Right.
So yeah, it's a real problem, and not one that is given much airtime, because again, men don't want to talk about it. I know our priests don't want to talk about it.
No,
Our
they
husbands
don't.
don't want to talk about it. But I think, and I think all of these issues really come back to the fact that we as women have to talk about them, because nobody else is talking about them. And I think
Right.
that's been one of the powerful things that has kept us silent, is this argument, and I hear it from women of every stripe. Oh, well, we can't, if it weren't for feminism, we wouldn't be able to do X, Y, or Z. I wouldn't have an advanced degree because of a feminine. Well, I'm sorry, but that's ridiculous to say we can't look behind the curtain because we've benefited from what was behind the curtain brought us. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's just a way to really certainly manipulate, but also kind of make people feel like they're part of this corrupt, and like bringing them into a kind of corruption where they can't be honest about what they're really seeing. And I think that's a huge problem that we have to kind of work beyond as well, in terms of what's really happening,
Yeah.
on
That
the
sort of
other side
makes
of it.
me think, people would never say that about slavery, for example. Like, our country benefited from
Right,
slavery at some
exactly.
point, and people would never say, like, well,
Right.
we can't look into that
Mm-mm.
because you benefited from slavery at some point,
Right.
hundreds of years
Right.
ago. It's okay to do a postmortem and say,
Exactly.
hey, what the heck happened here? And maybe how could we approach this differently in the future? Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
really important. I mean, that's how we learn, right? Like, as a matter of history, we can't.
Right.
History is doomed to repeat itself, right? If we don't learn from it,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly, I don't want my children, especially my daughters, well, and my sons too, living through this again in some sort of new way, because
Yeah.
where we're at right now is actually quite horrifying. I mean, especially for young children, the environment that they're being raised in, and it is almost entirely attributable to the rise of feminism. And
Mm-hmm.
sadly, too many men who have been emasculated for decades now and are afraid to stand up, just like Adam in the garden. I mean, it's the same story over and over and over
Same
again.
pattern. Mhm.
It is. So
Yep. It
I would
is.
like to shift to something a little bit more positive, perhaps, and talk more about like the theology of home type of stuff. Because, like I said, I've been following this for a long time, and what I
Yeah.
see going on right now in the culture, especially in women, like among female movements, is you see like a dichotomy, so to speak, or there's a juxtaposition. You have like one segment of women really embracing feminism, and you have another segment of young women embracing femininity and relearning what it means to be woman, because we were raised not to think about those things. I tell people all the time, women weren't raised to be mothers, they're raised to have careers. And that's why they think
Yeah.
it's so unfulfilling to be mothers, because they're wholly unequipped. They've never been taught how to do like the laundry and multitask and cook. They've been raised for, however 16 years to go to school and then have a career, and then they become mothers and they're totally out of their depth because no one taught them the fundamentals of motherhood, and no one's supporting them either, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody else is still working or has better things to do, so there's no support system anymore either. So like,
Mm-hmm.
what would you like to see, and how, with the theology of home and women embracing motherhood that way and their femininity, and what does that have to do with
Yeah.
emulating Our Lady and the wonderful female saints that we have as role models?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's a big question, but I think your point is exactly right, in terms of just I learned to cook mainly actually from my husband. He's
Me
an awesome
too.
cook,
I
and
did too.
yeah, and I learned so much from him. But yeah, I think that really is the hard thing. So then you have this child, or you have this family, and you're like, I don't know how to do this well. And none of us like doing what we don't know how to do. I mean, it's just
Right.
incredibly hard and challenging and just feels very isolating. And again, there's not the support. So yeah, that's, I think, theology of home in a certain way. I mean, part of it is, again, that response to how do we get our ideas out there in a beautiful, compelling way that nobody's actually ever even seen, because we're not supposed to make men look competent. We're not supposed to make big families look happy and ordered and not weird. All of those things go into it. But I think that there's a population of women too, I mean, like you mentioned, that are just really tired of the drama, and they just want to like be good women. They want to be women who are faithful to God and that are faithful to their husbands, and that, love their children and can help their children be the best that they're meant, the people that God means for them to be. And they want to press into that. And, of course, there's always the questions of, what do you think about women working and advanced degrees and all of that? And, I work and I have an advanced degree, so I don't think that all these things are mutually exclusive. I think that there's a way that they can be integrated. And, I turn down a lot of opportunities daily, in fact, because I am committed to being at home with my family, and I don't want my schedule to be too full to, nurse my son and all those other things that go into daily life. But all that said, I think it's important for women to see how this looks, like you said, because most of us didn't grow up with it. We don't know what it looks like. We think it's weird. Or it's uncomfortable, or there's not even that like place in the moral imagination to even think about it, or the creative imagination to think about how these things look and operate. We sort of have the impression of like the frumpy mom and, all of that, like things that just that are really unappealing. So anyway, I think that that's one of the things that, for me, it's always a question of like, what are we publishing? Could I give this kind of content to somebody who wasn't Catholic and they would still appreciate it? Yes, maybe they're not going to appreciate some of the Catholic elements that we put in our blog, but they're going to like the stories and the human interest stories and the travel pieces and, all of that. They're still going to be able to find something compelling about it, because I think there is some kind of human nature that women are attracted and drawn to these things that feel like they're improving our lives and our minds and daily living. So yeah, I think we have an exciting opportunity to sort of pivot away from all this drama. I think that, especially because the rage of the feminism, and there's so much that's so distasteful about it that just it's like a snowball. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They're, being pushed further and further to more radical positions, and it's just so unappealing. And I think that, this is also what's happening with the trans issue, is it's so unappealing, and it's so like there's an icky factor to it that nobody really wants to engage with it. They're like, okay, we've just gone too far. And that's what we're sort of pulling back from, is what, let's go back to these things that are beautiful and, cotton and organic and wooden.
Linen,
things that we just want to put our hands on and be able to feel and help grow, and, are nourishing and beautiful and bring order to our lives and homes and families. So I think that those are the things. And, those are not just Catholic women's desires. I think the desire of every woman, and we just haven't done a good job of kind of tapping into that. We've spent so much time kind of sexing up the whole situation that it's hard for women to sort of even pivot and think there's more to my life than my career and what Cosmo is selling. So
and I think it's hard too.
So that's
we live
what
in
we're really focused on.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's also difficult too when in a culture that's been so pornified. I think women feel like they're constantly competing with the women that, not only the women that they see, but the women that they don't see. And it's a really difficult environment when you talk about, again, kind of going back to what we discussed at the beginning of this interview, the things that the vices that women have an inclination towards are totally exacerbated in this culture, in this environment. And until they step away and unplug, it's really hard to rediscover your feminine nature. And I also think... Again, talking about how we express externally those interior dispositions. I mean, I'm not going to say there aren't any like beautiful feminists or whatever, but the reality is they have a reputation for not being feminine and they're not beautiful. And I think that's why we've seen a push over the last couple of years. We've been less hopefully less engaged with some of the icky. And you've seen like this pull towards cottage core type stuff where women are
Right.
planting gardens again, and they're wearing beautiful dresses, and they're wearing aprons and baking and learning how to make sourdough. It's like it's been interesting
Right.
to see this cultivation in a time where you almost wouldn't expect it because we're so isolated in a lot of ways. But I think women sort of were like, I'm done. I'm made for connection. I'm made for connection with God's creation and with my children and other people. And I don't like feeling divided in my heart because there's no peace there. And so they're reintegrating with
Right.
their environment.
Right.
And do you think
Mm-hmm.
that this is kind of
Yeah.
how Mary is going to conquer this? Like, you end the book on how Mary is going to prevail. I mean, we read it in Revelation; it's obvious. She already won the battle when she gave her fiat. So, I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about that. What you envision, or what you kind of propose in your book as we sort of reclaim our femininity as a culture.
Yeah. No, I mean, this was a fun and challenging part of the book to write because, of course, when you start saying, well, we just need to be more like Mary, people are like,
What does
what does
that
that
mean
even mean?
exactly?
They have a very kind of saccharine view of Our Lady. Like she looks like that statue in the church or, just feel, I think a lot of us, especially because of the lives that we used to live or the lives that we're still living, she just feels very removed from that. And so I was trying to figure out, like, how do I tap into the desires of the woman's heart and show that Mary's really there already. She's already in that place. She's already gets it. So I just looked at the, kind of the three basic elements of womanhood, those desires that we have. One of them, of course, is to be known and loved. The second one is to do good, some kind of good. And then the third one is to be beautiful. And, we can see all of these. In fact, that's one of the saddest parts about radical feminism is that a lot of these women are just so misguided because they think that they're doing something good. There's objectively this desire to do something good, but this objective expression of it is really disordered and off track. And so anyway, the key piece is really just looking at that Our Lady is all of those things. She's known and loved by God, better than any other human on the earth. Other than Christ, but of course he's divine also. So she's also, her will is so united with God that she's always doing good. There's always goodness happening there. There's a charity, and even in Scripture you see, even her visit to Elizabeth. I mean, what a charitable thing to do. I'm not going to go to help someone deliver a baby when I'm in those early months of pregnancy. Like, I'm miserable. But to see her, go there and help take care of Elizabeth she's delivering St. John. There, and the wedding feast at Cana is another one where she's, she doesn't want the couple to be embarrassed. I mean, those are things that women do very naturally, and I think she shows us a way forward there. And then, of course, the beauty factor. I loved when I wrote my book, The Marian Option. I looked at so many different apparitions of Our Lady, and to a one, everybody said she was the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. And even Saint Therese said she had an apparition of her, and she said, "You would want to die just so that you could see her again. She's so beautiful." Look at the beauty industry. Look at how much money we spend on cosmetics and beautifying ourselves. And you see that even in the trans movement. I mean, that's sort of the creepy thing about it is just the destruction of beauty by the mimicry of it and the mockery of
Yes.
it. And just the sexualization of it to the nth degree. But it's not that big of a leap given the fact that we've already been doing that as women. They're just mimicking disordered women in an even more dramatic way. But that's I think a key piece. And it was actually really funny. After I finished writing the book, I turned the manuscript in, and I was on a trip with my daughters, and somebody had just said, "Why don't you watch the Hallmark Channel?" And I think it was one of those nights, because I'd never seen it, where there's nothing else on TV. So I was like, "Why not?" Oh, yeah. Anyway, we watched two movies, I think, together, and then one of my daughters was sick in the middle of the night, and I had watched a third one with her after she threw up, and I just started laughing. I was like, you know what? The Hallmark movie has got it figured out, because it's always a woman who She's going back to her hometown to do some kind of good, like save a library or something. And she's, falling in love with a man who will know her well and intimately. And she's looking beautiful as she's doing it. Like they have got the woman's, the female heart figured out. And sadly, of course, they've gone woke. But in any event, it was just a great confirmation to me. Like, okay, even the Hallmark Channel has got this figured out. But Our Lady has these things already in spades and understands them in a pure way and lives them out in a pure way. And so that's the beauty of something like Marian consecration, where when we consecrate ourselves to her, she's going to draw these things out of us and point us in the directions in which we can acquire them, instead of it being this constant kind of kabuki in our head where we have to figure out, how do I do this? Because it's really challenging. And I know, throughout my life, there will be different times when I'm like, okay, I'm being taught a very serious lesson right now about maybe I'm being too assertive in this area, or maybe I'm, not paying enough attention in this area, or I just relearning things, because again, I think we're all recovering from this. So we've all been taught this ideology, and we don't really have a good way forward. We don't have these great role models that we can just look to, other than, great literature, reading books or stories like that. So anyway, I think that, she's kind of, Our Lady is reseeding women in terms of helping them know what womanhood is again, and how it looks, and the joys of it and the sorrows of it. Both of those certainly go together, and often at the same time. I remember this tremendous joy I had after my third child was born. And those weeks after childbirth when you're just dragging and you feel miserable, and there's an infection or two going on in your system. And I just remember this incredible joy. Like, I don't know why I'm so joyful right now, but I just am, and it was like, I felt physically, biologically so run down and tired and exhausted, but there was this incredible joy there. And I think that was just a great moment for me to sort of see so tangibly how those things work together, for my, growing up as a mature Christian woman. So anyway, I think there's, this could be a whole other book, but there's a maturing that she will do in all of our lives that, certainly when we stay close to her and are praying the rosary and Marian consecration and the Mass, and all of these things are going to help shave off those vices that we've just allowed to kind of overrun our characters.
Very well said. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I just want to give you one last chance to kind of let everyone know where they can find you and all of your amazing work.
Yeah, the best place is certainly theologyofhome.com. I also have a website, carriegress.com, that houses a lot of my writing over the last, 8 to 10 years, for back articles and things like that, because for years I've been publishing elsewhere, even before I started writing books. So those are probably the best places. But certainly Theology of Home has got, we've got a new book coming out, Theology of Home 3 should be out any minute. It was supposed to be out in March, and we've had all these supply chain issues, so it keeps getting delayed. But we're just really excited about that. It's Theology of Home 3 at the Sea, and it was just this amazing project to really dig into what is it that women in particular love about the sea, and what can the sea tell us about who we are as women, because so much of the sea is very masculine, but we finally, I think, hit on that right vein of, helping women to really use it as a great metaphor for how God created us and our relationship with him.
My first thought was like the waves of labor, like you just, that's, Oh, that's lovely. I'm excited.
There's so much to it.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you for putting all of that to work and doing Theology of Home and writing this book. We really appreciate it. And I want to encourage everybody who has not purchased the Anti-Mary Exposed since you were canceled and brought back again, please go and buy that book and check out Theology of Home. It's excellent work. Thanks again, Carrie, for coming on to Integrated. If you enjoyed this episode of Integrated, please like and subscribe here on YouTube and on your favorite podcasting platform. Integrated with Angela Erickson is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Check the description box to see how you can connect with me on social media. And maybe prayerfully consider supporting Integrated on Patreon to help offset the costs of production. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to live life integrated.